Hi, I'm Enchanting Newbie Annette. Welcome back. And if you're new to my channel, welcome. YouTube family, earlier today I was on YouTube watching episodes of various hood paranormal stories. So if you're not sure what it is, hood paranormal stories are a mix of like urban tragedy with folklore. They can be about haunted apartments in Chicago, cursed houses in South Central, ghostly legends in New York City projects, and even chilling urban myths like Cropsey. But they're definitely a lot more than ghost tales. They're like cultural memory carried through the streets. So it was very intriguing, listening to various people talk about their experiences. And after that, I said, you know what? I want to research information on housing projects because, as you may know, or maybe you don't, but some housing projects and neighborhoods in America were built right on top of old cemeteries, and residents, as I mentioned, often report strange paranormal experiences. So I'm going to break it down because, for example, in these housing projects, such as in San Francisco, California, in the early 20th century, the city banned burials within its limits. Cemeteries in areas like the Lone Mountain were dug up, but not every single grave was relocated, unfortunately. Many contractors, they still uncover coffins beneath homes even till this day. And here in New York City, where I live, there are several housing developments, such as in Queens and in the Bronx, and they sit on land that used to be burial grounds. For example, part of Hart Island is a massive potter's field and have been repurposed, and nearby, the housing has even been long tied to ghost stories. Now, focusing on Queens, the Queensbridge houses, where Nas is from, and I believe Roxanne Shante, which is in Long Island City. It was built in 1939, and the developer, of course, is a New York City Housing Authority, NYCHA. And the details of that, project is it's the largest public housing project in North America. It has, I believe, 26 buildings and over 3,000 units. Massive. And even though it's not directly on a cemetery, it was constructed during a period when burial grounds in Queens were being relocated, and the nearby land had cemetery ties as well as South Jamaica houses. So this is, South Jamaica. This opened 1940, and that was the first one, and the second was opened in 1954. Again, the developer, was NYCHA, and it's known as a 40 projects. The area had burial grounds and potter's fields nearby. There's a lot of oral histories that suggest graves were disturbed during construction. And since we're talking about New York, let's focus on Bronx. There's a Webster Commons, which is near Woodlawn Cemetery. It was constructed, it was completed 2016, very recently. The developer is Afghan Architects with Affordable Housing Partners. And some details, YouTube family, is that the site was owned by Woodlawn Cemetery for over 100 years before being sold in 2008. Now, the housing development now sits directly across from the cemetery on a land that was once tied to burial use. Then we have the Patterson houses, which is in Mott Haven in the Bronx. And that was opened in 1950. Again, the developer is NYCHA under the Robert Moses City Planning Initiatives. And the details, again, is not directly on cemetery land. However, the Bronx had multiple burial grounds displaced during mid-century urban renewal. So the Patterson Houses is just one of the largest NYCHA complexes, which has 15 buildings. So I did mention Robert Moses. You know, if you research it, Robert Moses did a lot of development in urban areas. And what he did, unfortunately, a lot of these areas, he built bridges purposely so that they would go through these towns, and it divided the areas, and it also caused a lot of these areas to be very overcrowded because they're easily accessible. So he did this all throughout New York City, and there's a beach that I love to go to, the Robert Moses Beach. When you go through Long Island in Nassau County, you go over the bridge and you go to that beach. It's further than Jones Beach, but I like it because it's a lot quieter. It's very clean, and it has a very good reputation, very safe.
Speaking of paranormal activity, listen, I grew up in the hood here in LA, right? And my apartment building seemed like a normal apartment building, actually pretty quiet compared to others in the neighborhood, right? But one day as a little kid, I'm playing in my closet, one of them narrow, long closets with the sliding doors. And I just so happen to look at the back of the sliding door, and it's gang writing on there. But there's also symbolism. It's in red, some with some bloods. I don't know, but I read it. But I just kept on going about my day and playing in the closet and playing in my room. I went to sleep that night. I started having very weird dreams. I can't tell you exactly what the dreams were anymore. But the one dream was so creepy. I just jumped up. I was so scared. My nose was bleeding, like bleeding bad. My mom came in screaming. I was screaming. Her boyfriend was screaming. Everybody was like, what the fuck is going on? After that, I would not sleep in my room. I refused to sleep in there. I just had this ill feeling about it. And so one morning, I was getting ready for school. That's the only time I would go in the room is to get my stuff and get ready for school. I reached in my closet to get my shoes, and something clear as day said, I'm going to get you. I promise you. I flipped out so bad. I went backwards trying to hurry up and get out of the closet. I hit the back of my head on the dresser. I cried all the way to school. I had a sad day at school. I didn't want to play with my friends, nothing. So my mom calls my grandma and my auntie, and they come over, and they're Christian. They proceed to pray over the room. I didn't go in the room to even see exactly what was done. But when my grandma came out, she had this look like, what in the world? She said the closet doors was rattling, like they was shaking when they was praying in there. But I could say that I didn't have no problems after that. Like I still didn't go and sleep in my room for a little bit, but I eventually went back to sleeping in my room. But I will never forget that experience. I don't know. I just put it in the back of my brain, went on about my life. But as I got older and I got more into like watching paranormal stuff, I was just like, that shit is real. I don't care what nobody say, and it happened in the hood.
The bridge and you go to that beach. It's further than Jones Beach, but I like it because it's a lot quieter. It's very clean, and it has a very good reputation, very safe. So going back to the housing project and cemeteries. So we covered San Francisco, California, New York City. Now, I'm going to give you details about Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, because there are affordable housing projects in West Philly. They were built adjacent to the Cathedral Cemetery, and it's not directly on top of graves, but the proximity has definitely a lot of local legends of hauntings. And then, of course, there's so many other towns across the United States, like southern towns and also to Midwest cities where cemeteries were often relocated, quote unquote, relocated when land was needed for housing. So many graves all across this country were missed, leaving so many bones and coffins beneath modern streets. Now let's focus on the paranormal experiences because there's so many residents. There are hauntings in many areas throughout the United States. However, I'm focusing on the urban areas right now. So many residents have seen a lot of, you know, visions. For example, they've had nightmares. Residents have reported vivid dreams of figures dressed in old clothing, sometimes matching the era of the cemetery. There's a lot of unexplained sounds, footsteps, whispers, knocks in homes, built near or even on burial grounds. There are times when, a room in a home or an apartment is extremely cold, where someone can see their breath in the air. There's also sudden drops in temperature, shadowy figures, moving all across rooms throughout homes as well. And there's a lot of like poltergeist activity being, witnessed where there's objects shifting, electronics turning on and off, cabinets and other doors opening on their own, and so forth. And as there's a lot that goes on, especially in urban areas in the hood, where there's a lot of, people who are like down. Not everyone, but there's a lot of people who are down. There's a lot of poverty. Unfortunately, there's a lot of violence as well. There can be gang activity. All of these things are negative. And, there's times when, it's said that a lot of the spirits, that are not rested, they will remain in these areas. Of course, they do have hauntings in other areas besides urban areas as well, like I mentioned. Could be in the South, it could be in the Midwest, mountainous areas, rural areas too. But, there can be a lot of negativity in, the more impoverished areas, such as, the hood and the inner city. So it's so sad that America has a habit of building over people who have passed away. There's cemeteries, especially where poor folks and, of course, black and brown people were buried. They got paved over for housing projects. And when you live on top of that kind of history, the people there are going to feel it. People often talk about hearing voices at night, having shadows moving in a hallway, even babies crying when there isn't any babies there. Well, when there aren't any babies there, excuse me. And it's definitely, some ancestors reminding everyone that this land has got a memory. You just can't cover it up with concrete and expect it to stay quiet, can you? So, history matters. This is regarding history erasure, where many of these cemeteries held marginalized communities, like I mentioned, African Americans, people who are immigrants, even Native Americans, the people who are native to this land, the original people, whether they're, Native American Indians or even Native Black people. So building over them, definitely erased some of their resting places, but there have still remained in these areas. And there's a lot of cultural aspects, such as the paranormal stories. They aren't just quote unquote ghost tales. They're living reminders of how America sometimes have and even still disrespects the dead, the people who have passed, excuse me, especially people who are very vulnerable, people who were not able to have their plots protected. So it's so unfortunate that many housing projects and neighborhoods across the United States have been built on cemeteries, and paranormal experiences that residents share are really a part of a deeper story about memory, history, and the respect for people who have transitioned. So everyone, regarding the ancestors, these are ancestors of, you know, many people throughout the this country. You know, when you build over ancestors, you don't just erase them. Their stays. So there are so many projects, for example, like I mentioned, that, especially have these situations happen. And, whether it's a projects or whether it's even residential homes. But there's such a huge impact on the people who have lived there, and it has shaped their lives, definitely. For example, everyone, there are hood paranormal stories like in the Chicago apartment hauntings. Many residents have reported hearing footsteps, doors slamming, and voices in the South Side apartments long after a violent tragedy has occurred there. Many neighbors say that the spirit of the victim still roams in the halls. In South Central LA, there's an M ending in R house, where, for example, a house on a block in South Central became infamous after a gang related M ending in R. People living nearby, they claim to hear the weapons echoing in the night, seeing shadowy figures, and feeling sudden chills when walking past there. Then there's a house in Los Angeles on 108th. It's known locally as being cursed. This house supposedly has have driven many families out. The tenants reported objects moving on their own, whispers in empty rooms, and even seeing apparitions of former residents there. And going back to, New York, in Queens and Brooklyn housing projects, many residents of the older housing projects whisper about spirits tied to land once used as burial grounds. For example, crying children when there are no children present, elevators stopping on phantom floors, and again, ghostly figures in the stairwells. So there's even more, in different cities. There's also hood folklore, which blends with urban legends like the Bunny Man Bridge in Virginia. Have you heard of this, YouTube family? It's where people claim to see a man in a rabbit suit haunting the tracks. And then Cropsey in Staten Island. It's even though I've been born and raised in New York, I rarely have gone to Staten Island. So in Cropsey in Staten Island, it's tied to an abandoned hospitals actually, and missing children. And those are more stories that I can't continue because it would make the video too long, but you can research that. Um, these abandoned hospitals and missing children. There's a documentary on it, I believe, as well. So everyone, these hood or ghost stories is not just for Halloween, because many people talk about haunted apartments, haunted homes, but specifically for projects, haunted apartments where the people who passed away never left. Houses are cursed from M ending in R, these tragedies. And again, these projects that's built over these cemeteries. So there's a lot of cultural memory, like, tragedies such as violence, displacement, and forgotten cemeteries. And, people are telling these stories, they're sharing them, and they're being passed down like folklore. And many people, you know, are living history that these things, have happened to them. So I don't doubt it. Everyone has their experience. Everyone has their spiritual, connections and beliefs as well. So what do you think about these hood paranormal stories? And do you have one of your own? So everyone, these are some of the ghostly legends in the different parts of our country. They're very chilling, but yet they are, very intriguing as well. Thank you so much for watching, and please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Everyone, stay safe wherever you are, and have your head on a swivel at all times.
Hey guys, so this story is about my twin sister. But after my twin sister died, so me and my mom, we went up there, and my baby sister, we went up to where she was. They had a body, and we went to view the body and had made arrangements for the funeral home in Mobile to go pick her up. And so we had to go clean our apartment out. So me and my mom knew. I told my mom I was going to raise her kids, and so we had to look for her kids' birth certificate and social security card. So me and my mom looking, and my sister, we all looking while we packing up stuff, but we couldn't find it. And I was like, we was just so emotional. We was just ready to pack the stuff up and just leave. So I told my mom, don't worry about it. I'll just go to Board of Health and get another copy of birth certificate and go to Social Security office and get another copy of their Social Security card. And I was like, let's just go. So we packed everything up, came back to my apartment in Montgomery. And so I had a lot of family members came at my apartment, so I didn't feel like being bothered. So while everybody was up front, I just went in my room and shut the door. And I was just leaning against the wall. And I remember sitting in the corner and just crying. And I had brought one of the suitcases where I had all her kids' stuff in my room. So I'm just sitting there crying, and just like in a state of shock. And I heard my sister's voice so loud and clear. I'm not going crazy. She was like, hey, Kiki, get up and look in the side pocket of the suitcase. And I was like, no, I don't feel like moving. And my sister was like, okay, but I need you to get up and look in that pocket. And I was like, you did not hear me? Now, mind you, just me in the room, but I heard my sister. I said, I don't feel like getting up. I said, I just viewed your body. You gone. I said, I'm mad. You're not here anymore. I don't feel like getting up. My sister said, girl, just get your butt up and just do what I say. She started hollering at me. So I was like, wait a minute. Girl, I don't care if you're dead or not. You ain't gonna be hollering at me. So now I'm hollering like, don't you raise your voice at me. I don't care about you hollering at me. So now I'm hollering. So, and my sister, just get up and just look in the suitcase. And so, I'm hollering back, don't you holler at me? So I heard a knock on my door. So it was my kids, my cousin, auntie. They was like, you okay? Who you hollering at? I said, Mika, she up in here hollering at me like she my mama. I said, I don't care. She don't be raising her voice at me. So now they looking at me like, what? I said, she up in here hollering at me. She lost her doggone mind. So they was like, okay. So they shut the door and they went on back up front. And so I got mad. So I went over there to the suitcase. And so I'm going through the pockets. And guess what it was? It was the birth certificate and social security cards up in the side pocket of the suitcase. And I was like, oh. And I heard my sister said, next time, just do what I tell you. And I said, next time, don't you be hollering at me. And so, and I heard her chuckle. And she said, bye. And I started crying because I knew I wasn't going to hear her voice no more. But she come to me regularly in my dream. But that was the time my sister hollered at me. And she was gone.